welcome. Hello, anyone who's joining us, and particular welcome to you, Del Adey-Jones. Am I pronouncing that right? Is it Adey or Adey? Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Del, for joining us for this month's conversation. And I'm really delighted that you are, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. As I was just touching on in the pre-call conversation, I had noticed you on Facebook, as you do with many people, but what really caught my attention when I was unwell at the end of last year, and I was listening in bed to some podcasts, and one that you did with Jason really caught my attention and I think it was for a number of reasons. One was the story of your childhood, which I thought was just very, very powerful and poignant. And I think anybody would be touched by it, but also what coming across the principles together with the rest of the things that have happened in your life, but how that seemed to me that what you were saying was that you were really, really set free from any kind of stuff from the past. And I think that's why we agreed on the conversation, the title that we did for this, which is Getting Free of the Past. And I think it can be so difficult when we're talking about the principles to somebody new to try and explain what it is or why it's so impactful. But I think that personal experience is incredibly powerful, and nobody can kind of argue with that. I think also that personal experience begins to give to some shape and some hint of what can be on offer simply by understanding how we operate. So Del, I'm going to hand it over to you and to just sort of take it away from there, and for as long or as short as you like, and welcome to all those who've joined us live, and please do feel free to come in if you have questions, and we'll probably pause again to sort of formally ask for that at some point. But Del, thank you again, and over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. And just a comment on what you were saying is I think in the principles sometimes we can be a little dismissive of our story or our past, and it's all thought, and leave it alone. But I do think there is some value to describe a scene and a pattern of thinking that came out of that scene or story, whatever you want to call it, and how, with the understanding of the principles, you can see it so completely differently. Mm-hmm. So I'll just indulge myself and you.
Please do. Please do.
that enjoy stories and give you just a rough overview of what it was like growing up for me. So basically, I'm the fifth child of 7 children, and I grew up I was born in 1959, so it was just at the tail end of the 50s. It certainly wasn't the 60s, and not in North Wales either. It was a very religious, Bible-thumping community. And I don't mean any offense, that I just mean it was a very judgmental community, put it that way. And we lived in the village, we lived on the outskirts of the village, about 5 miles away in the middle of the countryside, that we didn't have neighbors or anybody close by. And I didn't really realize how strange my life was until I came in contact, went to the local village school and really understood that we were very different. And that was that I was the product of an affair that my mother had with my father. He lived in the village. He was married and had his, as I used to refer to them then, real children. And he happened to have 3 children with my mother. And their affair, as I say, lasted about 8 years. But during that time, I never met him. I mean, it was my mother, to help raise us or bring money into our household. She turned our little Welsh cottage into a home for mentally handicapped and mentally ill people. So it was an aftercare home, and we lived in little caravans in the backyard, and we all had our own caravans. My sister and my younger brother, we had one caravan. My mother had another caravan, and my older siblings had another, they had other ones. So my father would visit, but he would visit late at night. and we never got to meet him. So when I was about 4, just before my younger brother was born, my father's wife came to our house. And I remember that incident vividly. It was a very, very painful period, or rather event for me, because I could see that she was clearly upset. And I knew that I was responsible, or that's what I felt as a child, that I was responsible for her upset, that I should never have been born, and that there was something really inherently bad and wrong about me, that I would cause this pain to this really lovely woman and her family. So that was the first taste of things. Well, not really, I should say first taste that the way we were brought up wasn't normal. You know, I know that I missed having a father. I know I missed hearing about him, but not meeting him, and hearing that my mother would say, oh, he loves you so much, but he can't be with you. So it was really confusing as a young child to hear somebody loves you, but they don't want to see you or meet you. And then when I was about 5 years old, I went to the local primary school in the village. And that's when I used to start seeing him. I would pass him on the street every day, going to school, or if I was lucky, sometimes if he was outside of his house or working in his garage, I would walk past every day. And he would just never look at us. He just would literally avert his gaze. And I made that mean that I was not good enough, not pretty enough, not skinny enough, not anything, any list of enoughs you can think of, that I wasn't enough to attract his attention or make him want to, you know, own me, as I said it, claim me as his, and love me. So it was, I just, again, at that point, so I first made the decision the year earlier that I should never have been born. I'm this awful person that's caused this pain. And then it became, I'm not good enough. You know, because I think as a child, naturally, what I realize now is that if I blamed myself, there was at least a chance of making it have a different outcome, because I would just work really, really hard at being perfect. And then there was a chance. If it was the fault of the parent, you know, to just say, well, they're incapable of loving me or whatever, that's it. There's no hope. So I was really hanging on to hope. And then when I went to the primary school, it was just excruciating, quite honestly. It was, you know, everybody knew our situation. You know, they were, you know, the polite words were that you're illegitimate. And again, the teachers could be quite cruel, as well as the other children. So I really developed a pattern of hiding, just being as invisible as possible, as to not draw attention to myself. And then also, and again, I'm just describing patterns of behavior. We know that, you know, in the principles, it is all thought, but not having had a father sort of love me, it often children, like especially little girls, fatherless girls, crave that attention. So I was just craved male attention. And I, you know, innocently and unwittingly put myself in very vulnerable situations for abuse. And again, at that time, I blamed myself. I was too needy. I was also told that it was my fault, that I'd, you know, and I'd asked for it by being too needy, to whatever it was that I was. So I was just kept amassing all these labels about myself. And really, I sort of failed to mention too, but when I was about 9 years old, we moved from this tiny little cottage into a great big rambling mansion. So full of mentally ill and mentally handicapped people. And at that time, I think we had about 50. And my mother, again, innocently, at the time, I was like, what are you doing? She just had this sort of reaction rather to being like, you know, these are our family, these are extended family. So she dotted all the children all over. You know, I was on one wing, my sister was on another wing. And we didn't have a sort of core family unit. And I was terrified. We didn't have locks on our doors. People just came in and out. And it was just a very, very frightening time. And I used to think, again, I developed a pattern of thinking that if there was a man in our lives, or a father, that I would be safe and I would be loved and I'd be happy. So that sets you up for a lifetime again of looking to the outside to feel safe. And I forgot to mention my mother, again, innocently, when we were young children, she said she was an atheist. So we grew up in an environment where there wasn't a God. And I think in her later years, I think she softened with that. I think she did feel there was something, but certainly at that time she didn't. And I remember thinking, this is crazy. This life is crazy. And if there's nobody that I can lean on, I'm all alone. And what I realize now is I was really looking for that spiritual connection, but I was told it didn't exist. And I, at that time, when I was probably in my late, I would say around 18, I found myself in a situation. I was alone living in the Canary Islands. I left home very young. And I just thought, God, I'm not equipped to live in this life. And even again, I didn't blame life for what had happened to me, or I blame myself. I just thought everybody else is equipped, everybody else is handling it really well, and I'm just too naive, too weak, too whatever. And I had, again, all my labels of what was wrong with me, that I couldn't function in this world. So I really wanted to take my own life. And again, the only thing that stopped me was my mother, because I knew that as busy as she was, and I at times resented her, taking care of all these mentally ill and mentally handicapped people, because she really didn't have much time for us. I knew that her children were her world. And I thought, I can't do this to her. So I've just got to stick it out. So basically, I really just carried this view of life, view of myself with me for the first 50 years of my life, I would say, until I came across the principles. And it was once I came across the principles, I was able to see for the first time, because before, even though I loved my mother dearly, I was like, what were you thinking? But now I realize that, separate realities, I don't know what they were thinking. All I know is that they were doing the best they can with the thinking they had in that moment. And the meaning I made of their actions, both my mother and my father's actions, was sort of like 1 and 1 makes 20. It was like I had this whole story that was so solid and so real and so, well, of course I feel this way, this is why. And I couldn't see outside of that. And then once I came across the principles, I realized that, that is the story. Those are events that happened. The meaning I made of it, I could have made it mean that in the moment, but to carry that through life and to make it define me and to live within the confines of that is so painful. And I'm just grateful that I came across the principles when I did. But if we can share this with other people that feel really, tied to their past and that it defines them, like even with, even with my abusers, I truly believe for whatever reason, in that moment, they had thinking, that they were just listening to that thinking. So now that I see that, it's like I've just let go of any hurt or anger. It's just, and the biggest thing for me is I had this experience a few years ago where I actually had a flashback. And I actually got to see myself completely and utterly separate from that child. I saw myself completely wrapped in, and God is still a hard word for me to use, but whatever you want to use that word, God, spirit, whatever it was, but I felt wrapped in that, and I felt so safe, so untouched, so unhurt, so unbroken. It was just a film that was replaying, and that's all it was. And it just passed. But it was a gift, because in that moment, I got to experience exactly what it was to be who I am at my essence. So pretty much, I think that's me.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, it's just such a powerful account of your life, Del. And do you know what came back to me, which I'd forgotten just at the outset? One of the things that happened when I was listening to you back at the end of last year was, like you, the principles had set me free from a lot of the beliefs that I was holding, the thoughts I had about myself of essentially being kind of worthless and unlovable. And I felt like, I felt free of that. I was very conscious of a before and after. But when I was listening to you, it suddenly popped up, and I can't even remember exactly why or what, but there was still some of that in there, some of that kind of worthlessness, And in the moment of seeing that, I also had an insight that it was just a thought, and it dissolved, and it is now gone. Except, it was just hearing you talk. Oh yes, that was something that happened there. But it seems to me that speaks to what you were saying. I mean, at the beginning of the value of just explaining the shift that can happen, the freedom that can come about. And I mean, I wasn't hampered by that at that point in time, but it was just a little vestige of old belief being swept away. But some people are, some people, and the folk around them, sometimes they're, well-meaning and innocent advisors are telling them, yes, of course you're broken because X happened, or X, Y, and Z happened. And so it's so
I do
powerful.
want to add a caveat here, because as much as I see, I'm like, we're human. We're going to get caught up. My insecure thinking can come back so often still. And I just have to have a gentle dialogue with it. Like, thank you. I know you think you're helpful, but this is actually not helpful. Or thank you for sharing. Move on, sort of no efforting. But yeah, it's, and I just see it's a habit. It's just a habit. It's a thought, or it was a way of seeing myself and labeling myself for so many years. It's just created a groove. So it's just going to keep coming back, but I don't have to believe it anymore.
Yeah.
Massive.
Mm-hmm. And I'm very comfortable with the coming and going. The back, today, that was a huge thing for me, that there's nowhere to get to. It is an ebb and flow, and of and that in itself, it was fantastic. It wasn't that life is going to be better once I've dealt with this, once I've had more insights. It's just, I'm fine right now, this moment. Who you are right now is more than enough. Yeah.
And also, I'm a painter, so when you paint, you need, color, variety, tone, depth. And I genuinely look back on my life and I am so grateful for it all. I mean, every single piece of it, because it has made me who I am. It has made me, when I work with my clients, I don't think I've ever had a time when I've gone, ooh, it's like, me too, me too. So it's given me that rich tapestry to work from, which I value incredibly. And again, looking back, it wasn't all terrible. I mean, growing up in the countryside of Wales, it was idyllic. We were like little vagabonds. We were running around the countryside, picking blackberries and playing in the woods and in streams and just on our own. It was a fabulous, free, unstructured, upbringing, because my mother was so busy, trying to, make a living for us all. So there were wonderful moments. I can look back with just so much gratitude and pleasure and delight as well. So.
Yeah. I get that. I had a city upbringing, but it was the same. I was off on my wee bike with my wee pals all over Glasgow. I mean, today it's unthinkable, just hours and hours away from home and at a time. Yeah. And that came out of your story, I think. I mean, I'm saying story, that's such a sort of inadequate word, but that you're sharing. But the resilience that you had, and the creativity, and the just the resourcefulness.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just having another story in my head. I don't know why I'm going to share it, because it was one of my lovely stories. We had really no money growing up, and my mother used to get our gifts from the rubbish tip. She would sew and dye and paint and make things out of what she found. Or, you know, our big night out was going to the local jumble sale with pennies in our pockets. And while she was trying to get clothes for us and for the residents, you know, she would be like, you go and do your thing. And I was like a little magpie, and I just went for anything that was beaded and glitzy from the Victorian times and the 20s. And, you know, I would buy them and she'd let me wear them. You know, so it was a very eccentric, you know, wild upbringing, but that's what led me to becoming a costume designer and coming here and working in Hollywood for, you know, quite a few years, doing costumes and styling. So it's, you know, it had its wonderful aspects too.
Lovely, lovely.
So does anybody? Yeah, I was going to say.
I was just going to, of course, if anybody does want to come in, please do unmute yourself. And I know, I don't know if you saw a comment from Lynn just thanking you for sharing.
Thank you.
I was going to ask if you could, because we've talked about, you know, the sort of before and the after, but how you actually came across the principles and what that process was.
Well, that was an interesting one. I was going through an extremely painful divorce. I think it's the separation started in 2008, 2009. We'd had you know, and I don't normally ever talk about my marriage, but just briefly, it was a challenging marriage, put it that way. And because I was unhealthy, I'll talk about my side, but I wasn't ready. I had done 30 years of therapy, but I still wasn't as healthy as I am today, put it that way. And I think when two unhealthy people come together, it can be quite volatile. So I was going through the separation. I was visiting my sister in Spain, and being there in Spain with her, I was able to sort of relax and get away from the situation a bit. But as I was on the plane coming back from Spain to LA, I just started having a panic attack on that first leg of the flight from Spain to London. And I mean, a real panic attack. And I just thought, God, I don't know what to do. I can't take a sleeping pill. I didn't drink at the time. So I was like, how do I calm myself down? You know, and I remember thinking, it was really horrendous. It's the only thing I can put it. And thank God I had two beautiful children that were my life. And that I just thought, well, you know, I got to keep it together for them. So when I got to London, I was in a bookshop and this title just jumped out at me and it said, "Stop Thinking, Start Living." And I was like, God, give me that. And I started reading it, and it was Richard Carlson's one of his very first books. It was written, I think, in the early 90s. And I read it cover to cover from London to LA. I didn't even have my nap. I didn't take my sleeping pill. It was like, oh my God, this is so invaluable. And I found myself calming down as I read it. And so that was my first exposure, but it wasn't referred to as the three principles back then. So I didn't know. I read his other books, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, but it was so diluted from what I'd first read that it just was like, it didn't mean the same to me. Mm-hmm. So then I loved the book, shared it with many people, certainly helped me. I mean, everybody was like, oh my God, I can't believe how well you're doing. So clearly it had an effect on me. And then about 5 years later, I was doing a coaching class. I had graduated in 2008 from Santa Monica University. I did a master's in spiritual psychology there. And I'd gone back in 2015 for their coaching program. And Steve Chandler was talking about the principles, but again, he didn't reference them. So I was like, I know this. So long story short, I came across it again in 2016. And I was like, I've got to research this Richard Carlson thing. You know, by then it had a name for me. 2016 was when I knew it was the principles. And I look back, and in fact, he had, you know, his father and George Pransky were very good friends. They'd both been students of Sid's. And so he was talking about the principles. And then since then, I just absolutely, you know, immersed myself, lived, breathed everything principles. And, you know, I was one of those that it took a little while. And again, I'm grateful for that. You know, there's some people that, you know, something hit me in 2009, but I saw enough to have some relief, but I was still staying a lot in that insecure thinking and believing it meant something about me. So I'm grateful for that too, because I have all the patience in the world when I work with my clients. You know, some people are like, well, if they don't get it in the first 3 sessions, and I'm like, oh no, please, you know, I had to hang in there so hard for the first, you know, couple of years before I really, and again, and that's what's so beautiful about this, is it just bubbles up. There's just, I had an insight this morning at a different level. It was the same insight. We always have the same ones again and again, but it was just a different level. And I just find it fascinating. I love being in the conversation. I love sharing it. I love doing my YouTube show and podcast, Insightful Conversations. I'm selfish. I get to talk every week with amazing 3 Principles people, and, you know, then do my sort of being of service, and that goes out in the world, and other people get to meet them via my show. So yeah, that's pretty much how I came across it.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, lovely. And how long have you been doing that, your show? How long has that been a feature?
My show that I have now, Insightful Conversations, is just beginning its 2nd year. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, for about 2.5 years, I did another show co-hosted with another woman, and we called it Mind, Body, Soul. And we did, it was like physical fitness, spirituality, psychology. So we covered everything. Mm-hmm. And then just over a year, about October 2018, I just was like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I'll have another law of attraction person on. And, you know, I just thought, you know, I just got to go straight for the principles. And that's the other thing I want to mention. I mean, as I mentioned, I hid so much as a child. I was painfully shy. And not just as a child, an adult. And if you had said to me, oh, you're going to, you know, host your own radio show, it was absolutely not on my radar. Why on earth would I ever do that? And I think that just, again, points to the principles, that the need to share, or the need to, or the want to share, I'll use rather than need, is more important than me being, you know, believing my insecure thinking and believing my label of I'm shy. And just, you know, going for it. So, and it's still, you know, I mean, I get thinking coming up every now and again. So,
but thank God that you are doing what you're doing. And, you know, it's become more and more clear to me that that, you know, there is a need for it. We have that expression that we use, like, stay in the conversation. And that, you know, what's increasingly clear to me is that that doesn't just mean go on another training. You know, and I'm very interested in encouraging the kind of grassroots spread of this. You know, I think that's perhaps one of the things that's we could use more of, and, you know, and just encouraging people to do whatever occurs to them to share it. And last year, at several different times, I spent time with friends who kind of came into this at the same time as me, you know, sort of been around for around 10 years. So not necessarily signing up for lots of trainings, but it was so magical just to sort of sit down in groups, kind of informally, but, you know, hanging out together, perhaps away for a couple of days or things like that. And just how special it is to have that connection and to be speaking from this understanding, because most of the people I am talking to in my day-to-day life don't, and it's not my job to sort of convert them or see them as a mark, you know, and say, no, that's not really where your feelings are coming from. So you're kind of, you know, just going along to get along and, you know, enjoying life. But there's something so special of having that connection with I think, you know, people who really get that. And something magical often happens, and that's been part of the motivation for doing these calls, you know, just to. And I'm very interested in having people who are not on every other webinar, you know, sort of, so that, you know, just that we, and we can, I think we can all play a part in, you know, if it strikes us as something that we're drawn to. Yeah.
It's so true. I mean, I have, you know, I've had all the first generation teachers, as they say, on the show, and that's wonderful. But I'm also, you know, I've always been attracted to story and people's lives and things like that. So I want like real people in real life share how it's impacted them and how they also share it in the work that they do. And I've had some incredible guests on. And I actually want to mention one other thing. I'm not sure. I'm trying to help bring the iHeart training over here, talking about, you know, having it be more grassroots and not just for people that can afford to go to trainings and things like that, but by taking it into, you know, our schools and teaching our teenagers before. I mean, it has incredible results in the rehabilitation centers and in prisons. But I love what the iHeart team are doing and how they're bringing it to our youth before they end up, you know, looking for outside solutions to you know, alleviate their suffering. So, and again, having had such a painful teenage years, you know, that's where my heart lies, is helping our youth, you know, understand sooner than later what's, you know, the nature of.
Well, I know you're not the only person in the call who's involved in the iHeart training for schools.
Oh,
Yeah.
Who else is involved in it?
Patsy.
Really?
I didn't want to, until she put her hands up, I didn't want to out her.
I think that's something to be really proud of.
Well, I just feel it's her place, not mine.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if anybody has any questions or.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. What's brought you to the call night? Can you see that? Oh, yes. Can you read that? Can you please explain what the iHeart training is?
Oh, okay. Yes. So the iHeart training is that they originate in the UK, and they if you take one of their facilitated training courses, what you learn is a curriculum that you can take into the school system, or actually just even in the private world as well. But, you know, I'm actually realizing, I think Patsy, I haven't done it yet. I'm just excited to try getting it over here in the States. It's going to be, the training is going to be in April, in person in April, in the LA area. But the online is about 10 weeks prior to that, with one-on-one calls with their teachers and trainers and webinars, and then a 5-day training in LA. But Patsy, would you mind explaining what it is if you've been through the program?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hi. It's lovely to meet you, Jill. So I just completed the second part of the training in December. So as you say, you have pre-training webinars, which are very useful. And then we had a 4-day training in London. iHeart stands for Inner Health Education and Resilience Training. And it's really, as you said, it's about going into schools, or indeed any kind of group where there are kids who an organization identifies people who need help, or where parents want to get together. It's very interesting. Christian and I have had conversations about it, because I met the person who's kind of got me onto it through Christian, and I am a teacher. So when this person came in with the book, with an actual curriculum, I was kind of going, oh, I love it. Oh, it's wonderful. Because as we know, the principles are just the principles. They just are. So you're trying to put form onto something that is formless. you know, I think that's very tricky. And I know as a teacher, I could not go into a school and say to a head teacher, listen, I've got this thing I can come and talk to you about, and it can really help the kids. And okay, what is it? Well, you know, so there needs to be, you need to be able to kind of give people something a bit more concrete. So I'm very impressed with it. I've started working with 4 kids. I work 2 days a week with deaf kids. So I've started, they're on part of session 2. It's going to, there are 10 sessions. It's going to take us 2 weeks to get through one session just because they are deaf. So they can't access things so easily. Already I've had really interesting comments from them. Like one of them who said, one of the clips was, you're unbreakable, you can't be broken. And she said, I don't agree with that. I'm broken. My heart is broken. You know, and then it's just talking about, well, remember we said you keep an open mind, and, you know, so just let's go through the course and then see how you feel about that at the end of it. I have head teacher friends who are very interested in me bringing it in. The model we're using, Del, is that there should be 2 practitioners going in because there's a lot in it. And my teacher head, I've been in and I've watched people doing it. My teacher head says sometimes there's just far too much in one session. And really, I think there are times where you have to drop things. And as long as, you know, concentrate on whatever the big idea is. So I think it is a super program. There are 7 of us in Scotland now who are trained. So we're trying to kind of take it out. And I think ultimately we would be looking at a Scottish iHeart, if you like, because going up and down to London is not particularly handy. But I don't think it's perfect. I don't think anyone in iHeart would say it was either. But that means that they keep adding things on. So then people have, you know, you've got your curriculum, you've got your lovely folder, and then someone says, oh, and we've updated that. So you kind of have to change it. But it's an evolving thing, you know. And you do not mention the principles. You don't mention principles.
Exactly.
That's
yeah,
quite
it's more about resilience. Is what
resilience. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think it's I've heard, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot of curriculum.
Huge.
But
It's huge.
I also see it as a calling card to get into institutions that, as you say, need a bit more than follow the feeling or sharing what comes up in the moment. I think there are places that you know, that is very, very helpful to have a curriculum. So I'm excited. I'm so excited to.
I'm really thrilled about it. But, you know, you said something about money there, and you do have to charge schools for it. And the problem is you're going into just now, just the way things are, there's not a huge amount of money around. So it's kind of balancing it, you know, with can I offer it to a school, you know, 2 for the price of 1, if you like, or something like that, you know, because we are very keen up here to get it out to as many. Let's face it, if we don't teach our young people about this, you know, we're failing really, because that's where it's got to start, to give them this understanding. So yeah, it's very exciting. It's early days.
Yeah. And the other thing is, you know, I live in Los Angeles, and you know, I mean, we have a phenomenon here that is so painful to see when we, you know, when my children are now 23 and 26. When I first had them go to school, they would do earthquake training. We're in California, so it would be how to duck and hide and survive an earthquake. Now, I don't even know if they do earthquake training. They do mass school shooting training. And every school has to know how to protect themselves and what to do in the case of a mass shooting. And that, to me, I don't even know how many we've had, but it seems like it's every week. And it is something like that we will have a mass shooting. And I just find that so terribly sad. And not just for the children that go to school, fearing for their, you know, is our school going to be, you know, the next one, but also the children that are, you know, perpetrating the crime. I mean, it's the pain that child must be going through to think that is an option. To kill other children and to kill themselves. I mean, so I feel so strongly about getting this out, because I see there's a crisis. And not only that, but, you know, they're dealing with things like that. They're dealing with social media. You know, self-harming, climate crisis. We didn't even have the climate crisis when we were growing up. My children are a bit like, well, why would I have children? Because there's not going to be a world for my children to grow up in. That's an issue. So there's a lot facing them, and I really, I'm going to do what it takes. So
there's a great clip in one of the sessions, and it's a survivor, a young chap who survived a school shooting, and it goes through his stages of how he just did not want to go to school, which is perfectly understandable, and how going through the program has helped him kind of just absorb that was an experience, and he is alive, and he can celebrate that. But I think there's an existential thing going on with kids, because they're all talking about social media, not feeling good enough, and everybody's prettier than I am, and their boys have all got better girlfriends, and it's huge. It's absolutely,
it is huge. Somebody just commented that not just in California. I might have said California. I mean, in the United States, across the country, we are. Yeah, it's not just a gun issue. It is a mental health issue too that I feel needs to be addressed.
Del, I've got another question. I don't know if anybody else on the webinar wants to, anyone who's here live, but if there isn't anyone right at the moment, somebody messaged me one, and it's a biggie.
Okay.
Yeah. So the question is, this person said, my question for the webinar would be about mind. Is mind or God all powerful? If he is, why do the world need for us humans to raise our level of consciousness? Why do we have free choice? It seems very cruel to me to give us the possibility of suffering. I'm a little stuck with this. I just wonder, you're not required to give a definitive answer, but I wondered.
I've got George Pransky in my head right now going, his normal response is, that's above my pay grade. That's in my, for me, I can only talk from my experience.
Exactly.
And as I said earlier, I know I suffered, but at the same time, I have zero regret about that suffering. That I think it's the natural state of our humanness is to go in and out of low mood, high mood. Suffering can be in the low mood, but I just think that is what makes life. That tapestry I was talking about, who knows why it happens? I don't know. All I know is I'm grateful for all of my experiences, every single one of them. Even when my insecure thinking comes back in, I don't try and fight that anymore. It's just here. It's just telling me that, maybe my thinking is not as healthy as it could be, or whatever it is. But it's just so, I just know that it's just going to pass. It's just going to pass when it's ready to pass, without my interference, without my help. But no, I can't. I'm going to do it, George. I cannot. That's above my pay grade. That's as deep as I can go.
Yeah. I think what strikes me about is just having an awareness of the principles, having had some insight into the system to the extent that I have, is that it has changed. Well, it's certainly changed my view of the past. It's removed the sense of victim. So simply knowing that who I am is not up for grabs, that there is an essence, and actually I was just writing about this today. That one of the reasons I couldn't find a faith in a sort of higher power was I had a very firm preconception of what that should look like, and of course it didn't measure up like that. And I think what the principles has delivered for me is a different kind of faith, and it's the faith. It's not to do with bearded people in the sky and all of that or anything like that, which was kind of part of what I couldn't get my head around. But it's to do with knowing that the potential to be okay in the face of anything exists within me. That's my birthright. Now, I might not be okay if things that I don't like happen or I don't want, but the potential will still be there whether or not, And it's a different thing than what I was looking for that has been revealed to me, that's been given to me through understanding the principles.
Yeah, I think probably in a way it was an advantage for me not having religion as a young child. Well, I shouldn't say it has its positive and negative effects, but I didn't have that formal religious upbringing. But when I was about 9 years old, my mother had enough money to send us to private school, so she sent us to a convent, and they knew about our situation, so they weren't very happy. Took them. My mum bought them a piano after a couple of years, and that lightened them up. But the nuns were very, very opinionated, and very strict Irish nuns. And so but I knew there had to be something. And when I first got to America I think it was when I was 21, I found there was this beautiful little bookshop called the Bodhi Tree, and I just went on a mission. It was like I read every book, did every workshop. I just knew there had to be something else. I really did. And again, a fabulous and amazing, journey through all those years of exploring different things, different modalities. I was a shadow coach for quite a while. I don't know if that's the sort of Jungian reclaiming the shadow, which I loved because I had so many things that were in my shadow that I had deemed as, unacceptable about myself, that when I was able to sort of like look at that and embrace it and embrace the totality of who I was, that helped an awful lot. When I came across the principles, it was just really the icing on the cake. It's like, because it pointed in the same direction. Mm-hmm. That we're just spiritual beings having a human experience then, and to just be loving and kind and gentle with ourselves and other people. And when we are like that with ourselves, when we are understanding towards our own humanness, we're understanding towards everybody else's. And that just is the ripple effect, the peace that comes from that.
Lovely. So that's God and the universe dealt with.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anybody else who's on the call who would like to come in? It'd be lovely to hear from you. And failing that, Del, I'll maybe just hand it back to you and give you the opportunity to, wrap up and perhaps tell us what you're up to at the moment, and how people can contact you if they want to know more, find out more.
Okay. Well, I do my weekly show, and Christine is going to be on in a couple of weeks, I think. So excited for that. And what else am I doing? I coach. I love coaching. I love working one-on-one with clients. I'm working on a couple of workshops. I'll be speaking at the 3PGC conference, the Round the Globe in 48 hours. So I'll be speaking on that. And just hoping to do more workshops, reaching a wider audience than just one-on-one coaching, even though that's very rewarding to me. So that's pretty much where I'm at.
Oh, so. Cool. And if anyone's interested in doing the iHeart in yes. Ellie, are you kind of sponsoring that? Are you? Yeah.
Yes, I'm heading it on this side of the Atlantic.
So are you the contact for that?
Yeah. I am the contact. So I will, please contact me or email me at Adey-Jones.com. Sorry, that's my website. Or Adey-Jones@gmail.com is my email address.
I'll put both of those in the notes underneath the YouTube recording.
So there's no spaces and no hyphens. It's just all one word, Del Adey-Jones.
I'll get that information, and it'll go up tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's definitely the big project right now. I'm very excited and just add one more thing. I see that we can, when I listen to people like Elsie Spittle and Judy Sedgman and the work that they did out in the streets with the community all those years ago, and I just feel like I'm here in LA and we have a desperate need with children that are living on Skid Row or homeless. And I'm looking at taking, once I go through the facilitator training, that we can start doing more, community things. And we have an amazing 3P community in LA. And I just think if we can all come together, and, we have issues on the border with children being separated from their parents. I mean, there's so many areas where we can take this and help our youth. So I'm very excited to have as many people join us on this facilitator training. And please contact me if you have any questions, and I will give you as much information as I have, and then I'll give you Jeremy from My Heart's email, and you can get even deeper information from him.
Oh, cool. That's great. That's absolutely great, Del.
Thank you so much.
Well, I wonder if it seems like we've maybe just reached a point, which would be nice just to draw it to a close. And I am so grateful to you for taking the time today. It's been a real pleasure to hear more about your life and everything that you're doing. And so thank you very much indeed. And thank you everybody who's joined us. Patsy, thanks for your input. And have a great day, the rest of the day, whatever you're doing. And I will see you again very soon.
Yes, lovely. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us.